Joining us now, Timothy Snyder, author of the New York Times bestsellers On Freedom and On Tyranny. Tim, good to see you. Putting aside the fact that this meeting appeared to achieve nothing, Donald Trump had looked like he had changed his tack with Vladimir Putin, starting to talk tough as recently as yesterday, suggesting there will be sanctions if they don't agree to some kind of a deal. And then you watched what we watched in Anchorage. Nothing but fawning and admiration for Vladimir Putin, who seemed to be running the show, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to take a step back from the two men and just remind us what's going on. There's been for 3.5 years an illegal war of aggression. Mr. Putin is an indicted war criminal. His armies have destroyed entire cities. They've kidnapped tens of thousands of Ukrainian children for brainwashing and re-education. They've killed hundreds of thousands of people. The attacks on civilians are ongoing. This is the great crisis of our time. And knowing that, having that as the contrast for these two men going to Alaska, in their suits and smiling and taking car rides together, it's a shocking contrast. And what it reveals, coming to your question, is that what Mr. Trump is thinking about so far, as far as we can tell, is just himself. All you have to do is stand next to him and say nice things about him, and then you get his permission to do whatever you want in the rest of the world.
And to be clear, Vladimir Putin's position has not changed since the first day of the war. There have been no concessions. There's no attempt to do anything except, as you said, praise Trump and suggest that he might be a peacemaker at some point. Nothing's actually happened on the ground. And every time Donald Trump takes a strong position vis-a-vis Russia, Russia then launches a massive attack on Ukraine, which could be underway now and could be underway tomorrow. That's how they respond to Donald Trump putting pressure.
Yeah, I mean, as far as we can tell so far, they have his number completely. So when you say Trump takes a strong position, I mean, what you have in his mind is his occasional rhetorical shifts where he feels pushed to concede that, in fact, Russia has done something in this war. But what Mr. Trump has not done, and this distinguishes him from President Biden, he hasn't made any policy. He hasn't invoked sanctions, secondary sanctions. He hasn't talked about freezing Russian assets. He hasn't talked about increasing aid for Ukraine. On the contrary, he's made huge concessions to Russia. He's tried to take NATO off the table. He doesn't talk about reparations. He doesn't talk about any sort of punishment after the war. He's made these huge concessions. So the Russians believe they have his number. The Russians believe all they have to do is flatter him. The Russians believe they can then make fun of him on television, as they will be doing this evening, and that things will just continue to go their way.
You are not just an historian, but you really understand this region very well. You're a bit of a specialist on it. Vladimir Putin, interestingly enough, mentioned that U.S.-Russian relations are at a low point since the Cold War, as if it has nothing to do with the invasion of Ukraine, and then talks about sort of dealing with the root causes of the issue and suggesting that it was Russia's security concerns that led to the invasion of Ukraine a couple of years ago. Now, this is not that outside of the ordinary. In fact, Hitler used these same excuses in invading neighboring countries all the way back then. Their own security concerns, extending the umbrella of protection to German speakers in other countries. It's a perversion of history and the truth.
Well, for Hitler, it was a security problem that Poland existed. It was a security problem that Czechoslovakia existed. And for Putin, it's a security problem that Ukraine exists. When Putin talks about the root causes, what he has in mind is that Ukraine exists, that Ukraine is sovereign, that its people vote for their own leaders. And if we accept that as a root cause of war, what we are doing is inviting back an age of imperialism where anybody has the right to invade anybody else just because they're bigger and they feel like it. And that, of course, is the entire mood which Mr. Putin was trying to establish with a great deal of success, thanks to Mr. Trump at the summit, that everything that happens in the world is just about great powers who have nuclear weapons, who meet and shake hands and ride together in cars and then do whatever they want. Whereas out in the rest of the world, we have sovereign states and we have nations and we have people who want to live in freedom and, yes, peace, who have to defend themselves when one of these countries says a root cause of war is that you exist.
How do you deal with the fact that we came to this conclusion after World War II that as a world we would not accept this. It's not just if you're a NATO member. We accept it as a world that states are sovereign and should be free of invasion from other states. The idea that this conversation occurred in Anchorage without any reference to NATO, without any reference to an actual invasion by one country of another country, and with the United States president standing there and not standing up for the basic rule of order that we've decided that we've had in the world since the end of World War II. How do you think about that? How do you process that?
It's very simple. I mean, I think Mr. Trump sincerely wants to be remembered as a peacemaker. But his refusal to take on board all of the realities about the world, past and present, which have to do with war and peace, makes this impossible. What's happened, on the contrary, is that Mr. Trump has made this war longer and he's made it worse. He was the great hope of Russia, which is a fact he cannot face. He remains, from Russia's point of view, a sustaining and encouraging factor in this war. And that will be the case so long as he continues to do the kinds of things like he just did. Inviting an indicted war criminal inside your military base and your personal limousine is not a signal that you want a war to end. It's a signal, and will be understood as such, that you will enable and allow the war to continue.
And yet, though he has not said this to the rest of the press and didn't take questions, he did say to Hannity, it's basically up to Zelensky now. It's in his hands to we don't know what that means because we don't know what Trump and Putin discussed. But in what world is this up to Zelensky to end this?
I mean, it's clear that Trump's implicit and sometimes explicit scenario of how this war ends is that the Ukrainians just give up. That's his scenario. And the Ukrainians can't give up. They didn't want this war. They were invaded. They have to fight because the Russians commit war crimes over all people in all territories that the Russians occupy. They have no choice. If Trump wants Ukraine to end it, he has to make Ukraine stronger. He has to give Ukraine the ability to defend itself. That's the way the war comes to an end. And that's a basic geopolitical reality, which I'm sure many people around Mr. Trump do understand. The only way for Zelensky to end it is not to surrender. That would just mean more war, more atrocity, and future wars. The only way Zelensky can end it is if we empower Zelensky, if we're on the side of Zelensky, on the side of the Ukrainians, and help them to defend themselves, to change the power position. That's what we can do. So far, we're changing the power position on the side of Russia. We're making it impossible for the Ukrainians to end the war.
Timothy, good to see you as always. Thank you for being with us. Professor Timothy Snyder is the author of On Tyranny and On Freedom.